Hey guys, today I'm going to show you how to use Rhino inside. Just a quick tour of how you get from Grasshopper and Rhino into Revit. It's a great new plugin. It's been around for a little bit. It lets you do all sorts of great things right from your interface in Revit, including Rhino. And so we're going to go into this really quickly. We're going to first look at the Rhino.Inside, which is a plugin that, again, you have a license of Rhino or a trial license, you should be able to get started with this. Pretty much it installs just like any other plugin. Starting point is pressing start. We're actually going to start with a new file. This is a previous file. You can see these geometry, and I'm not using Inkscape, so that's why that's giving that little error there. But the geometry of my model is all made in Grasshopper, not Dynamo. So we're going to go into this, and it's going to be a very simple workflow. You can see that I have the geometry already in this file. I'm going to go ahead into a new file, and I'm just actually making particular walls for this architecture structure. There's a 20 by 40 structure. And the idea is I want to have like that curvy wall, and the idea is, of course, creating beautiful curves are much easier in Rhino. So I'm going to go into the Rhino environment just by clicking Rhino, and so you can see on the tab and bars for Rhino.Inside you have like the ability to go into Rhino viewport, see what's happening in the viewport, also do all the functions of Grasshopper, even the Grasshopper player. But we're going to go straight into Rhino because we've actually generated the geometry within Rhino. One thing it might be useful because this actually is not a freestanding version of Rhino. This is actually working within, so it's like you can do a lot of things you would of course do, but the fact is it's all sort of feeding back into Rhino. So that's going to be a difference. You can't just have Rhino running separately. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to open a file that I've already sort of created with my curve wall, and it's really simple curve wall. I'm going to continue. It gives me the option of what I'll choose. I'll go ahead and use feet, and so hopefully this is in the right scale. That's another important thing when using Rhino.Inside. So it's still at my 40 feet goal here. And so I'm going to zoom into this little area. And so you see I just took a curve, and what we're going to be using is actually paneling tools to put panels on this wall. And again, this is obviously something that's not native in Revit, but it's like pretty simple if you've had like this workflow, and it's a great plugin within Grasshopper. Okay, we're gonna go in. There's also a plugin within Rhino, but of course, obviously exporting from Rhino into Revit actually takes quite a while on certain things. So it's really beautiful to be able to go straight from Grasshopper into Revit. I'm gonna go into my Grasshopper, and I'm gonna start publishing this in Grasshopper to get to Revit. So we're just gonna load it a little bit, and then we'll just fill everything out. So now we have Revit all sort of in the background. It's still breathing, but we're running Rhino inside of it. So what I'm going to first do is I'm just going to do my typical titling, where I just give a title to the program and just input surf and curves. That's going to be just sort of the nature of this function. It's called surf panel. I'm going to go ahead and save this. I have a folder for it. We call this surf panel 2. And so what I'm going to start doing is just set some of the inputs. So because I have this sort of a built structure, my normal wall can be fine in Revit. I don't really, I don't have to do that in Rhino. But I do want to create like geometries for my floor and for looking at my roof from Rhino. So, and also there's a little tile that I'm going to be using in the program. So I'll go into a little bit what you're going to see with your Grasshopper inside of Revit. The first thing you're actually going to see is, of course, this Revit geometry sort of input area where you can be pretty much just like normal sort of params, only you see Revit. and that's more for inputting when you're on the Revit side, because it can input from within Revit. Right now we're going to be inputting from Rhino, and so what we're going to do is we just use typical Rhino geometry, and then we'll have the outputs. As you can see, the tabs here, they're different tabs. If I go into my full screen, you'll see that there's a tab for annotation, building. This is direct shape, for sort of drawing directly into Revit. Also working with the document, with elements, families, filters, host. There's also for inputs, working with materials, working directly in the model, and some different things for object style parameters, or working with things like sites, topology, the type view, and for walls. And the idea is obviously that's very complicated, and I would say we're going to just start very simple, and you can just sort of pick up things from here that will help you go into that mode. This is going to be just simple, sort of go into it. I think it's a great thing to be learning, and just a basic little micro course. The first thing I'm going to do is put a space for my curve, because I'll have like my curve for my roof curve and one curve for my floor curve. And I'm just going to copy this. Just go ahead and just copy and paste. And these are going to be sourced from Rhino. And then I'm going to make a B-rep that's going to be my surface, right? And we're also going to do another B-rep that's going to actually be the basis of my tile. And I will note one thing: you're going to have issue using sometimes the commands, because obviously Revit might overtake the keyboard input, so just be careful about that. That's my tile. And so I'm going to go on how to use paneling tools if you have not used that before. And this is just my B-rep surf. And so for paneling tools, we're essentially, it's a way of working, and there's a command that's running. We have to stop that. Okay. So essentially, the idea is any surface you have, it can create a grid across that can be turned into panels. For instance, my paneling tools, Rhino, simply, I could simply just say I want to see a set of points across surface by the number, right? And it will just give me this this grid set, which I can introduce that. But I can also change it, with this little points there, and then I can choose from this 2D grid, just selecting it to create a set of 2D panels, right? And you could just lay it across there, okay? And I can make a surface for it. I also can, do some other things with it. But the idea is getting that into Revit is going to be like sometimes a hassle, especially if you're increasing in size. So let's see the Grasshopper alternative for that. And again, we're trying to definitely keep on how to do the workflow within Revit.Inside, but it's important to see how that function works, because we'll be later taking that into the program for Revit. So I'm actually going to take things like the roof curve and the floor curve into Revit first, so you see this process. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and connect this curve with this curve. And actually, that's going to be joined. That's going to be my floor curve. Okay, so before I just push forward, I will definitely look at what happens when you're trying to build something in Revit. So the idea is, of course, there's annotation, or there's model elements. If you're trying to add something like a floor, you have to think about things like levels, you think about things like grids. The concept is that you have to often put a type, just like your families and such, and you're actually going to find that in the input tab area, And the idea is you're going to be looking for making the type that you're using, like in your file, and you also have this ability to go in here and see from the component picker different types of tags and families that you could be using, right? So if I already know that I'm making a floor, you can just go ahead and type in floor here and sort of see some of the options for things that are in the model. So obviously, if you don't, sort of see directly, you can go into Revit and it'll tell you sort of, some types that are already there, right? So this actually is updated. I know it operated in a level. It's sort of evolving because I saw some other videos that have different types. But like you just will choose like a type, right? If I just choose this floor, I can just put this in as my type. I can put my floor curve as my boundary, and I can just give it a little bit of space. And you actually, if we go back into Revit, you'll actually see that in Revit. So I've actually has my locations are synced. And so I'm gonna close my first file. Okay, everything's gonna be really based on this model. And so you see right here, you actually can see all my sort of sort of bases for my curve. So I just turned it into a floor. It's already actually even geometry in Revit, but it's pinned because it's linked to the model at the moment. So I could change something in Rhino and it would change directly there as well. And so I still will put a level, and the way that you can get level, I'm going to close this little picker element here. Again, we've got that from this area, is I can choose my levels picker, and if I say everything that go on level 1, I can just click right here, and that will go straight to level 1. And so, and I also have the choice of choosing structural or, or not. I'll just do false. Okay. And so this actually is already in Revit. So that's a simple workflow for getting something in. Now let's go for sort of that roof. Again, like adding a floor, adding a roof are pretty much the same. You just will give your boundary. Now the idea is it's actually located here, and you see it's already sort of putting that generic element in here. I can always sort of customize it more, but it does like a pretty good job of sort of just putting that generic one right in there. Of course, you can massage anything out in the program of Revit. So it's that simple to get something, and you see it both in your Rhino and in your Revit. Okay. And so the next thing we're going to do, and I'm actually going to go back to the plan view, and then we're going to go to perspective just to keep my grid in the right place, or I could just come back out. See if we can reset that. Okay. So what I'll do now is I want to work on my surface. So I'm going to go ahead and just click this as my 1B rep surface, because I'm going to use this as my tile. The tile is not really needing to go into Revit. You'll see it because I've turned on to see the geometry in the Rhino.Inside tab, but I'm only really going to take in the surface after I process it. And so I'm going to go into the paneling tools elements, and that's where we're going to be working on getting that in. Now, the level, obviously, sometimes, the idea is this overrides. You'll see the offset from here is going to override. That's why, if you want to choose it to a level, or if you want to create a level, you also have that ability of adding levels, adding different information within here, pretty much. Let me see here. I believe adding your level is going to be more of a model element. You can add a greater level right here. Okay, but we're not going to be adding that for right now, nor a title block. We're going to go straight into the paneling tools section. Okay, so in paneling tools, what we're going to do is we're going to just start off just like I did in the regular program of just creating a grid. I'm going to do the grid off number. Again, like there are ways where you can project a grid. I'm just going to be really simple about it. It just gives me like a really nice grid that will go on my area, and it's 10 by 10 in UV. And what I can now do with this grid is I can actually turn it into a surface. However, for my 3D component, like I'm going to use this little tile here, I really need to have two surfaces, so it's like the inside and outside, so offset. And so even one way we're going to actually make this a little more believable is we're actually going to come in by 3 inches, right? And I'm just going to go on ortho to get it in. Actually, make sure that's 3 inches in the model. Okay, and I'm going to actually offset the surface. It's a regular offset of a surface, and we just have it here. Take that B rep and it's just going to be, you can just go ahead and put in 3 inches. And so one of the things that we're just trying to definitely make it happen is that it's not, you know, that it's understanding how I'm dealing with the geometry, because it's going into feet. So what I'm going to actually do is I'm going to do like a division, and we're going to just do 3 over 12. And that's going to be the easiest way to get that into the right place. Okay, that's going to be the area and the width of my tile. Okay, and I have my tile, it's already selected. Now what we're going to do is to create grids for both of these, right? That's the outer surface and the inner surface. These will have 2 different grids, but they're all based on the same numbers. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is now go, whereas you saw me do like a panel 2D, I can just make a 2D panel. I want to make a 3D panel and get it right into Revit. I'm going to click on Morph 3D, and I'm going to bring my base grid and just drag that over, and then my offset grid, and I bring both my tile, which is my pattern object, and I'll use the function bounding pretty much a bounding box to take that as my bounding objects. And now I get to put in my surface, because right now you just sort of see, like, you know, sort of basic in there. It's sort of actually already sort of is configured according to the surface, but I still put it in there as my base surface. And we already have our set of objects, right? So that's a awesome little surface wall. Now I haven't, you're going to see it in Revit as just sort of a placeholder geometry. It's not selectable, it's not really in Revit yet. So that's our next stage. And the idea is, right now I'm just keeping it simple. We're not going to be making it into like curtain wall panels yet, or walls. I'm just going to show you like a simple way to get it into Revit. And that's going to be the way of actually creating geometry using direct shape. So direct shape, you know, there are 2 different methods. The first one is just really adding with BREP, where I could just take this object directly from the program, and that's including like individual tiles, and put them all in, and they're going to all go into Revit. The issue with that one is I don't really get to choose a material, and it's a little bit limited. So choosing something like geometry is a little closer, but it's still a quick method. And so I'll just call this Surf 1, and I'm going to say that's the name. Category going to be generic models, and you actually can find like that same picker that I use here is pretty much like we're saying our element type picker, and I'm going to choose generic models as sort of my type. That's what I would normally do, like before sort of in making some of the geometry. But actually, one of the great things for direct shape actually, and this sort of, you know, a little confusing because obviously when you're adding type before, that's what I would use. But when you're using actually direct, you actually have a direct shape categories button. And so I think this one was giving me an issue before I used it with another method. But for this method, we actually can just straight up go into generic models here, click that right there, put that as a category. And then we could set all the geometry, and the idea is what you could do, of course, is even though I sort of had it as a group, it actually came in as one whole set. You can do it as individuals as well if you want. I'm going to go ahead and also set a material before I plug it in. I'm going to go to here, and you see that it is a Revit material. And all I need to do is right click on that, and I get to choose what I want it to be. And if I want it to be like a glass wall, I could just go ahead and click down here, glass, and it's just a basic glass here. And I just plug that into material, pull that through for the geometry, and go into Revit, and just sort of maybe use our little button right here. And you see it's not just, picture, it's actually actual geometry. So, and when I go into shade it, you can see that it's still there. And I have the ability to turn this roof. I can simple edit it after I sort of disconnect from the Rhino model. And so we're going to just quickly sort of go through that finalizing workflow. Go back into Rhino. I'm going to go ahead and actually, let's click here. Go ahead and save this as my Surf Panel 2 code. Go ahead and close it. Save this file. That's where I started. Got a lot of great workflow from that. And we can just close it here. And now everything is, it's still locked. If I open that Grasshopper file, I can unlock it and sort of change it. And again, that sort of breaks a little bit of the connection with it. Like if I wanted to extend this finally out, and be mindful about how the curve might not fully connect. Is the curve language from Rhino is sort of roughly brought in. You might want to just use, you sort of saw it like a straight line. So again, this doesn't change the way that Revit is thinking. So we're going to actually make sure that none of these are defining a slope. All right, don't attach. But now you see it. You have an awesome Revit, and again, I set that material. Because this is sort of generic model, you not really have that much control within Revit on some of the things. That's why you might go a little further. But for like quickly getting an idea into Revit, this was an awesome tool to use. So I hope you can get some ideas. I'll put up some more content on using Revit.Inside and trying to really break some of the boundaries. But this was just a great new tool that's essentially it's been there for like a few years now, but they're developing it and it's being more comprehensive, and it's something you can find out for workflows with Dynamo. But the idea is like you can skip like the line for learning too much Dynamo and get like great stuff into Revit from Rhino and from Grasshopper. Thanks for joining me. This is Brandon with IM Studio. Like and subscribe for more content.